This is insane HOA madness. The HOA made it personal, and I made it documented. I crouched by my bumper checking the tire pressure when I heard the shutter click. I looked up and there she was, Karen, phone aimed at my VIN plate, snapping photos like a crime scene investigator. She lowered the phone and her eyes went wide with that hunter's gleam. "I care what the policy says," she said, voice sharp and cold. "Your guest pass expired 2 days ago and the registration on file does not match this vehicle. That is TOW on site per Addendum 7. I stood up slow, wiping my hands on my jeans. I had moved to Copper Canyon Estates Commons Association in Carmel, Indiana 6 months ago for work, thinking a quiet neighborhood outside Indianapolis would be a reset. I am an insurance fraud investigator, so I recognize patterns fast. This was a shakedown. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice level, "this is my car. I live here. The guest pass is for my girlfriend when she visits." She shook her head, dragging a portable folding sign stand closer with her foot, the metal legs scraping the asphalt. "Laura Stewart," she corrected me, "and I am the vendor coordinator for this association. If the paperwork does not align, the vehicle is unauthorized." "Go ahead and call whoever you want. I have a committee for that." That line stuck in my head. She said it like a threat and a promise rolled into one. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA portal app. The screen loaded slow, spinning. Karen stepped closer, tilting her head. "You have until I finish this call," she said, lifting her own phone to her ear. "Then I am authorizing the tow." "Wait," I said. "Just give me a second to pull up my registration." She tapped her screen. "Hi, this is Laura Stewart, vendor coordinator for Copper Canyon Estates. I need a flatbed at Unit 412, immediate removal, violation of the parking addendum." My portal finally loaded. I navigated to my vehicle registration page and turned the screen toward her. "See? Same VIN, same plate, registered 6 months ago." She glanced at it for half a second, then looked away. "That does not prove your guest has authorization. The decal program requires separate validation for overnight visitors." The decal program did not exist when I moved in. I knew because I read every page of the covenant. This was new. "When did that start?" I asked. She smiled, thin and cold. "Last board meeting. All residents were notified." I checked my email while she talked into her phone, confirming the tow order. There was no notification. Nothing. I scrolled back 2 weeks. Empty. "I did not get any notice," I said. "Check your spam," she said, still smiling. A rideshare driver pulled up to the curb about 20 feet away, waiting for his passenger. He leaned against his door, arms crossed, watching us with the tired expression of someone who has seen this exact scenario too many times. He rolled his eyes when Karen raised her voice. The tow truck arrived in under 10 minutes. That told me everything. Laura had this vendor on speed dial, probably got a kickback for every car they hooked. The driver climbed out, clipboard in hand, and walked over without even asking questions. Laura pointed at my car. "That one," she said. "Addendum violation." The driver nodded and started back toward his truck. I stepped in front of him. "Hold on," I said. "I live here. My car is registered. This is my assigned spot." He looked at Laura. She nodded. He shrugged and kept walking. "I work nights," I called after him, "and I have to leave for a fraud case review in 90 minutes. If you tow this car, I miss a hard deadline and my clearance review gets flagged." Laura folded her arms, the portable sign stand tucked under one arm like a weapon. "Then you should have read the addendum." The driver hooked up the wheel lift. Metal clanged. I heard the hydraulic whine. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, switching to the camera app. I started recording. "What are you doing?" Laura snapped. "Documenting," I said. "If this is a legal tow, you will not mind." Her face went red. She stepped toward me, jabbing a finger at my phone. "You do not have permission to record me." "We are in a common area," I said. "No expectation of privacy." She opened her mouth, then closed it. The driver kept working. My front wheels lifted off the ground. I felt my stomach drop. I had $1,500 in the checking account and rent due in a week. A tow fee plus impound would wreck me. How do I get my car back? I asked the driver. He did not look up. Call the yard. They will tell you the fees. And how much is that? Depends, he said. Tow fee, impound per day, administrative processing, lien filing if you do not pay within 72 hours. I looked at Laura. She was smiling again. This is not over, I said. She turned and walked toward her unit, dragging the sign stand behind her, the metal legs screeching. She called back over her shoulder without turning around. I do not care what you think. I care what the rule says. I called the tow yard from my apartment. The automated system told me the fees. $350 for the tow, $80 per day impound, $100 administrative processing charge. If I did not pay within 72 hours, they would file a lien and the total would double. I did not have it, not without emptying my account and missing rent. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my laptop screen. The HOA portal was still open. I clicked through to the documents section and found the parking addendum Laura mentioned. It was dated 2 weeks ago, uploaded the day after the board meeting. I read it 3 times. It said all vehicles must display a current resident decal and all guest vehicles must have a validated 24-hour pass displayed on the dashboard. Failure to comply would result in immediate tow at owner expense. There was a line at the bottom about the vendor coordinator having sole discretion to authorize removal. Sole discretion, that was the key. Laura could tow anyone anytime, and the rules backed her up. I opened my email again and searched for any mention of the new policy. Nothing in my inbox, nothing in spam. I checked the HOA mailing list archives. There was one message, sent at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, with the subject line Policy Update Reminder. I opened it. The body was 3 lines. It said the parking addendum had been updated per board resolution, and residents should review the portal for details. No attachment, no summary, no grace period. That was the scam. Bury the notice, enforce immediately, collect the fees. I grabbed my jacket and keys and walked to the clubhouse. The office was closed, but the bulletin board outside was lit. I took photos of every posted notice. None of them mentioned the parking addendum. I walked the loop around the main drive and checked the guest parking area. There were chalk marks on the tires, fresh ones. Someone had been out here within the last few hours marking cars. I recognized the pattern. Laura was running a compliance hotline, taking calls from residents who wanted to snitch on their neighbors, then using those reports to justify tows. She probably got a percentage from the vendor. I had seen it before in fraud cases. The setup was always the same. Create a rule no one can follow, enforce it selectively, and profit from the chaos. I walked back to my unit and sat down at the table. I opened a new document and started writing everything down. Dates, times, photos, the missing notice, the chalk marks. I was building a case file. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my girlfriend asking if I was okay. I told her what happened. She called me immediately. They cannot do that, she said. They just did, I said. So what are you going to do? I stared at the violation letter on my screen. I smiled. I am going to prove exactly what I suspected. The next morning, I called the management company that ran the HOA. I got transferred twice before someone picked up. I explained the situation. The woman on the phone sounded bored. You will need to submit a written complaint, she said. I already have documentation, I said. I want to know if the tow vendor has a valid contract. She paused. That is proprietary information. It is a contract funded by resident dues, I said. I have a right to see it. She put me on hold. Muzak played for 4 minutes. When she came back, her tone was sharper. The board has authorized the vendor coordinator to manage parking enforcement, she said. If you have a dispute, you can request a hearing. I requested a hearing in writing. 2 days later, I got a certified letter. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The letter also informed me that I owed the association a $50 dispute filing fee and that my vehicle would remain impounded until the matter was resolved. If I did not pay the impound fees within 72 hours, the vendor would file a lien and begin the auction process. I called my insurance adjuster friend Marcus, who had dealt with HOA cases before. He told me to document everything and file a complaint with the state attorney general's office. I did. I also called the tow yard and explained I was disputing the tow. They did not care. They said I could pay the fees or lose the car. I paid. I emptied my checking account, used a credit card for the rest, and picked up my car on day 3. When I pulled into my assigned spot, there was a new violation notice stuck to my windshield. It said my vehicle was parked crooked and violated the aesthetic standards policy. There was a photo attached. I looked at the photo. My car was inside the lines. I peeled off the sticker and took it inside. I added it to the file. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the chalk marks. I got up at 2 a.m. and walked the loop again. I saw Laura. She was out there with a flashlight and a roll of chalk, marking tires in the guest lot. I pulled out my phone and started recording from across the street. She did not see me. She worked methodically, marking each tire, taking photos with her phone, then moving to the next car. When she finished, she walked to my building and stopped at my car. She pulled a violation sticker from her jacket pocket and slapped it on my driver's side window. She took a photo of that too. I watched the whole thing, 4 minutes, start to finish. She walked back to her unit, and I stayed in the shadows until she was gone. I went back inside and uploaded the video to cloud storage. Then I sent a copy to Marcus. He replied within an hour. "This is harassment," he wrote. "File a police report." I filed the report the next morning. The officer who took it was polite but skeptical. He said unless there was a direct threat or property damage, the HOA dispute was a civil matter. He gave me a case number and told me to keep documenting. I went to work that night and came home to another sticker. This one said my vehicle was parked in a fire lane. I looked at the curb, no red paint, no signage. I took photos of the entire area and added them to the file. 2 days later, I got another certified letter. This one said I owed $300 in violation fines, and if I did not pay within 10 days, the association would place a lien on my property. The letter listed 4 violations: expired guest pass, crooked parking, fire lane obstruction, and failure to display a resident decal. I did not have a resident decal because the HOA had never issued me one. I called the management company again. Same woman. She told me the decals were distributed at the last annual meeting. I moved in after the meeting. She said I could request one by filling out a form and paying a $20 replacement fee. I filled out the form online. It said processing time was 6 to 8 weeks. I had 10 days to pay the fines or face a lien. I called Marcus again. He told me to lawyer up. I could not afford a lawyer. He said in that case I needed to fight it myself at the hearing and bring every piece of evidence I had. He also told me to check if the tow vendor actually had a valid contract with the association. If they did not, the whole thing would collapse. That got my attention. I went to the county clerk's office and requested copies of all HOA contracts filed in the last 3 years. The clerk took my $20 fee and told me to come back in 2 days. I came back. She handed me a folder. I opened it in the parking lot. There were contracts for landscaping, snow removal, pool maintenance, and security patrols. No tow vendor contract. I flipped through the pages twice. Nothing. I went back inside and asked the clerk if there were any other contracts on file. She checked her system and said no. I asked if the HOA was required to file vendor contracts with the county. She said only if they involved liens or assessments against properties. Towing contracts did not qualify unless they were tied to a formal enforcement policy approved by the board. I asked for a copy of the board meeting minutes for the last year. She printed them for another $10. I sat in my car and read through them. There was no mention of a tow vendor contract. The parking addendum had been approved, but the resolution did not name a vendor. It just said the vendor coordinator would manage enforcement. Laura had been authorizing tows without a contract. I drove to the tow yard. The dispatcher was a guy in his 20s with a grease-stained shirt and a cigarette behind his ear. I asked to see the contract authorization for Copper Canyon Estates. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. "We do not give that out," he said. "I am a resident," I said. "I was towed from my own assigned spot. I want to see the paperwork that says you had the authority." He shrugged. "Talk to your HOA." I leaned on the counter. "If you towed my car without a valid contract, that is theft. I will file a police report and a complaint with the state." He disappeared into the back. 5 minutes later, he came out with a folder. He flipped it open and showed me a single-page letter on HOA letterhead. It was dated 8 months ago. It said the board authorized the vendor coordinator to contract with the tow company for parking enforcement services. It was signed by the board president. 8 months ago. That was before Laura became vendor coordinator. I asked for a copy. He said no. I took a photo with my phone before he could stop me. He grabbed the folder and told me to leave. I left. I sat in my car and zoomed in on the photo. The signature was illegible, but the date was clear. I checked the board meeting minutes again. Laura had been appointed vendor coordinator 5 months ago. Someone had backdated the authorization letter. I called Marcus and sent him the photo. He called me back in 10 minutes. "That is fraud," he said. "If the contract authorization was backdated and the vendor has been towing without a valid agreement, the HOA is liable for every tow. You need to bring this to the hearing and demand a full audit." The hearing was in 2 weeks. I spent every free hour building the case file. I printed the video of Laura marking tires and slapping the sticker on my car. I printed the photos of the missing notices, the chalk marks, the violation letters. I printed the county clerk records showing no tow contract. I printed the photo of the backdated authorization letter. I organized everything in a 3-ring binder with tabs. I also reached out to other residents. I posted in the neighborhood group chat asking if anyone else had been towed or fined under the new parking policy. 12 people responded. 3 had been towed. 8 had gotten violation letters. One guy, a contractor named Miguel who serviced HVAC units for half the complex, told me Laura had threatened to have his van towed twice while he was mid-job. He said she followed him around with a handheld radio, calling the tow company every time he parked in a guest spot for more than 20 minutes. Miguel agreed to come to the hearing and testify. So did 2 of the towed residents. 3 days before the hearing, my girlfriend came to visit. I told her to park in the guest lot and display the pass I had printed from the portal. She did. We went inside for an hour. When we came back out, there was a violation sticker on her windshield and a tow truck idling at the curb. Laura was standing beside the truck talking to the driver and pointing at my girlfriend's car. I walked up fast, recording with my phone. Laura saw me and smiled. "Her pass is expired," she said. "It is dated today," I said. She held up her phone showing a photo of the pass. The date was wrong. I looked at my girlfriend's windshield. The pass was current. Laura had photographed a different car and was using the photo to justify the tow. "That is a different car," I said. Laura shrugged. "Policy is policy." The driver hooked up the wheel lift. My girlfriend started yelling. I kept recording. The driver lifted the front wheels. I called the police. The dispatcher said they would send an officer, but it would take 20 minutes. By then, the car would be gone. I stepped in front of the truck. The driver honked. Laura pulled out her phone and started recording me. "You are obstructing a legal tow," she said. "I will have you arrested." I stayed put. My girlfriend got in the car and locked the doors. The driver climbed back in the truck and revved the engine. I did not move. He honked again. Laura was screaming now, calling me a criminal, a squatter, a freeloader. She said she had every right to protect the property values of Copper Canyon Estates, and people like me were ruining the neighborhood. The rideshare driver from before pulled up to drop off a passenger. He saw the scene and stopped. He got out of his car and walked over. "What is happening?" he asked. "She is trying to tow my girlfriend's car for no reason," I said. He looked at Laura. He looked at the truck. He pulled out his phone and started recording too. Laura turned on him. "You do not live here. Leave." He did not leave. He stood next to me. Phone up, recording. Laura's face went purple. She screamed at both of us, then turned and walked toward the clubhouse, the portable sign stand dragging behind her. The driver waited another minute, then unhooked the car and drove off. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I showed the officer my phone video, the backdated letter, and the chalkmark photos. He took notes and gave me another case number. He said the tow was questionable and I should bring everything to the HOA hearing. He also said if Laura kept harassing me, I could file for a restraining order. Laura did not stop. The next night, she left a stack of violation notices on my door, 5 of them. Each one cited a different made-up infraction: unauthorized window tint, non-regulation license plate frame, excessive vehicle idling, unapproved bumper sticker, and my personal favorite, failure to maintain factory standard tire pressure. I added them to the binder. The hearing was scheduled for Saturday morning at 10 a.m. in the clubhouse exterior walkway, not inside the meeting room. The board wanted to avoid the formal recorded meeting rules. I showed up at 9:45 with my binder, Miguel, the 2 towed residents, and my girlfriend. The board president, a retired guy named Ed, was already there with Laura and the board secretary. Ed looked uncomfortable. Laura looked like she had won the lottery. We stood in the walkway while residents walked past heading to the pool. It felt like a setup, like they wanted to humiliate me in public. Ed opened the hearing by reading the complaint I had filed. Then he asked Laura to respond. She pulled out her own binder and started reading from a script. She said I had violated the parking addendum 4 times, obstructed a legal tow, harassed a vendor coordinator, and filed frivolous complaints to waste the board's time. She said the association had every right to enforce its rules, and I was trying to create chaos because I did not want to follow simple guidelines. Ed nodded along. The secretary took notes. I waited until Laura finished. Then I opened my binder. I have documentation, I said. I pulled out the video still of Laura slapping the sticker on my car at 2 a.m. I passed it to Ed. This is the vendor coordinator trespassing and vandalizing my property in the middle of the night. Ed looked at the photo. He looked at Laura. She did not flinch. I was conducting a compliance check, she said. That is within my authority. I pulled out the county clerk records. I passed them to Ed. There is no tow vendor contract on file. I checked with the county. The board never approved a contract. Laura has been authorizing tows without legal authority. Ed flipped through the pages. His face went pale. Laura grabbed the papers from him. That is irrelevant, she said. The board gave me discretion. I pulled out the photo of the backdated authorization letter. I passed it to Ed. This letter is dated 8 months ago. Laura was appointed vendor coordinator 5 months ago. Someone backdated this document to cover up the fact that the tow company has been operating without a valid agreement. Ed stared at the photo. He looked at Laura. She looked at the board secretary. The secretary looked at the ground. Where did you get that? Laura asked. The tow yard, I said. I asked to see the contract authorization and they showed me this. It is fraud. If the board did not approve a contract, every tow Laura authorized is illegal. The association is liable. Ed sat down on a bench. He rubbed his face. Laura started to argue, but Miguel stepped forward. She tried to tow my van 3 times while I was fixing an AC unit, he said. I work for half the people in this complex. She follows me around with a radio and threatens to call the truck every time I park in a guest spot. It is harassment. One of the towed residents spoke up. She towed my son's car when he came to visit for my birthday. He had a valid pass. She said it was expired and had it towed anyway. I had to pay $400 to get it back. The second resident nodded. Same thing happened to me. My sister visited for the weekend. Pass was current. Laura towed her car the second day. No warning. No grace period. Just gone. Ed looked at Laura. She folded her arms. They did not follow the protocol, she said. What protocol? I asked. There is no contract. There is no policy. You made it all up. Laura's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her face went white. She tried to silence it, but it kept buzzing. She turned away and answered. We all heard her say, "What do you mean the contract expired?" She hung up. She turned back to us. Her hands were shaking. "I need to make a call," she said. She walked away fast, the portable sign stand forgotten on the ground. Ed looked at me. "What just happened?" "I have no idea," I said, "but I am going to find out." I followed her at a distance. She walked to the parking lot and stood by her car, phone pressed to her ear. I could not hear the words, but I could see her face. She was panicking. She ended the call and stared at her phone for a long moment. Then she got in her car and drove off. I went back to the walkway. Ed was talking to the secretary in a low voice. When I walked up, he stopped. "The hearing is postponed," he said. "We need to review the documentation you provided." "When?" I asked. He did not answer. He and the secretary walked back toward the office. Miguel looked at me. "What do you think that was about?" he asked. "I think the tow company just told her the contract expired," I said. Miguel grinned. "Then every tow they did after that is illegal." We stood there in the morning sun while residents walked past. I felt the weight lift. The case was breaking. That afternoon, I got a call from the management company. It was the same bored woman. Her tone was different now. "We have reviewed the materials you submitted," she said. "The board has requested an emergency meeting to address the parking enforcement policy. You will receive a formal notice within 24 hours. I got the notice that night. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening. The agenda included one item, review and revision of parking enforcement procedures and vendor oversight. I called Marcus. He told me to bring everything and be ready to demand a full audit of every tow Laura had authorized. He also told me to bring witnesses and ask for an independent third-party review of the vendor contract situation. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I printed copies of every document for every board member. I organized a timeline of events. I contacted every resident who had been towed and invited them to the meeting. 8 people confirmed they would come. I also did something else. I took the photo of the backdated authorization letter in the county clerk records showing no contract, and I emailed them to every homeowner in the complex using the HOA directory. I sent the email at noon on Wednesday, 6 hours before the meeting. The subject line was, "HOA parking enforcement may be operating without legal authority." The email went out to 250 residents. By 3 p.m., my phone was ringing nonstop. People were furious. Some were angry at Laura, some were angry at the board, some were angry at me for stirring things up. I let it go to voicemail and kept preparing. The meeting was at 7 p.m. I showed up at 6:30. The parking lot was already full. The clubhouse meeting room was packed. Residents stood in the hallway, in the lobby, outside the door. I saw Miguel. I saw the towed residents. I saw the rideshare driver. I saw people I had never met before, all holding printed copies of my email. Ed called the meeting to order at 7. He looked exhausted. He asked for quiet. It took 5 minutes. Finally, he cleared his throat. "We are here tonight to address concerns raised by a resident regarding the parking enforcement policy," he said. "The board has reviewed the documentation provided, and we have identified several irregularities that require immediate attention." Laura was sitting in the front row, arms folded, face blank. She did not look at me. Ed continued, "It has come to our attention that the vendor contract for towing services may not have been properly authorized. We have contacted the tow company and confirmed that the contract expired 4 months ago. Any tows conducted after that date were not covered by a valid agreement between the association and the vendor." The room exploded. People started shouting. Ed banged the gavel. It took another 5 minutes to restore order. One of the towed residents stood up. "So what does that mean for the people who paid impound fees?" Ed looked at the board attorney, who had been sitting silently in the corner. The attorney stood. "The association is potentially liable for any fees paid under an invalid contract," he said. "We are reviewing the legal exposure now. We will likely need to negotiate a settlement with affected residents." Another resident stood. "What about Laura? She is the one who authorized all the tows." The attorney looked at Ed. Ed looked at Laura. She stood up slowly. "I was acting within the authority granted to me by the board," she said. If the contract expired, that is a clerical oversight. It is not my fault. The room erupted again. Miguel stood up. You followed me around with a radio threatening to tow my work van, he shouted. You knew the contract was expired, and you kept authorizing tows anyway. That is not a clerical oversight. That is fraud. Laura's face went red. She turned to face the crowd. I do not care what you think, she said, her voice rising. I care what the rule says. Someone in the back row shouted, the rule says you need a contract. Laura opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her hands started shaking. She sat down hard. Ed took control. The board will investigate this matter fully. In the meantime, the parking enforcement policy is suspended. No further tows will be authorized pending the completion of an independent audit. The vendor coordinator position will be reviewed. Laura stood up. She grabbed her bag and walked out. No one stopped her. The door slammed behind her. The meeting continued for another hour. Residents asked questions. The attorney gave vague answers. Ed promised transparency and accountability. The board voted to hire an independent third party to review all parking enforcement actions for the past year. They also voted to require 2 board member signatures and documented proof before any future tow could be authorized. When the meeting ended, people came up to me. Some thanked me. Some blamed me for causing trouble. Miguel shook my hand and said he would testify if the audit went to court. I went home and sat at my kitchen table. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. You did it. I replied, not yet. The audit took 6 weeks. The independent reviewer found that Laura had authorized 43 tows over a 5-month period. Only 12 of those tows had documented violations. The rest were based on subjective interpretations of the parking addendum or outright fabrications. The reviewer also found that the tow vendor contract had expired 4 months before Laura was appointed vendor coordinator. Every tow after that date was unauthorized. The board held another emergency meeting. This time it was standing room only. Ed read the audit findings aloud. When he finished, he announced the board's decision. The association would offer full refunds to any resident who had paid tow or impound fees during the period covered by the audit. Laura Stewart would be removed from the vendor coordinator position effective immediately. The board would also implement a new parking enforcement policy with strict oversight and resident input. Then Ed said something I did not expect. The board has also decided to schedule a special election to fill 3 open seats. Nominations will open next week. I looked around the room. People were nodding. Miguel caught my eye and grinned. A board election challenge that flips the power dynamic. 2 weeks later, Laura was summoned to a mediation session. The HOA attorney had negotiated a settlement with the affected residents, and part of the agreement required Laura to attend the session and provide a formal account of her actions. I was there. So were Miguel and the other tow-aid residents. Laura walked in last, escorted by her own attorney. She sat down at the table and did not make eye contact with anyone. The mediator, a neutral third party hired by the state, reviewed the audit findings and the settlement terms. Then he turned to Laura. Miss Stewart, the settlement requires you to acknowledge your role in the parking enforcement actions and apologize to the affected parties on the record. Do you understand? Laura's attorney nodded. Laura said nothing. The mediator waited. Finally, Laura spoke, her voice flat and mechanical. I acknowledge that I authorized tows without a valid contract. I apologize to the residents who were affected. The mediator wrote something down. That apology is now part of the permanent record. The settlement is finalized. Laura stood up and walked out without another word. Her attorney followed. The room was silent. Miguel looked at me. That is it? He asked. That is it, I said. Outside, the sky was dark. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I walked to my car and unlocked the door. The keys on the carabiner jingled. I got in and sat there for a moment, staring at the clubhouse. The lights were still on inside. People were filing out, heading to their cars, talking in low voices. I started the engine and drove home. When I pulled into my assigned spot, There were no chalk marks on my tires, no violation stickers on my windshield, no tow truck idling at the curb, just an empty parking lot and the sound of distant thunder rolling away. I went inside and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. There was an email from the board. It confirmed the settlement refund and thanked me for my patience during the review process. It also included a link to the nomination form for the upcoming board election. I clicked the link and stared at the form. I thought about everything that had happened: the late-night patrols, the harassment, the threats, the fabricated violations, the fear that I would lose my car, my home, my peace. Then I thought about the chalk marks, the backdated letter, the expired contract, the audit findings, the look on Laura's face when her phone buzzed during the hearing and she realized the tow vendor had blown her cover. I filled out the nomination form. I hit submit. The confirmation page loaded. 3 months later, I won a seat on the board. So did Miguel. So did one of the towed residents. We ran on a platform of transparency, accountability, and resident-first policies. We won by a landslide. Laura moved out 2 weeks after the election. No one saw her leave. One day her unit was occupied, the next day it was empty. The portable sign stand was left by the dumpster. Someone took a photo and posted it in the neighborhood group chat. People laughed. I did not. I just felt relief. The new board held its first meeting in January. We voted to overhaul the parking enforcement policy. We required written warnings before any tow. We mandated that all vendor contracts be filed with the county and posted on the HOA portal. We created a resident oversight committee with veto power over enforcement actions, and we banned chalk marks on tires. Miguel made a motion to install security cameras in the guest parking lot. It passed unanimously. The cameras went up in February. No one has been towed since. I still see the rideshare driver sometimes. He waves when he drops off passengers. I wave back. We do not talk about it, but we both remember. The neighborhood is quieter now. People park without fear. Guest passes are issued fairly. The tow truck never comes. The HOA is still an HOA with all the bureaucracy and pettiness that comes with it, but it is no longer a weapon. It is just a system, and systems can be fixed. I think about Laura sometimes. I wonder if she learned anything. I wonder if she regrets it. Probably not. People like her do not change. They just move to a different neighborhood and start over. But that is not my problem anymore. I am sitting at my kitchen table now, writing this down, and my car is parked outside in my assigned spot with no chalk marks and no violation stickers. The keys are on the carabiner hanging by the door. The coffee is hot, the sky is clear, and I am finally home. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.